All right, welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections Podcast. Appreciate you being here. Before I introduce today's guest, which, it's always funny when I say that because you already know who it is. You pressed play. You know who we got on today. This is going to be a lot of fun and I think really insightful. I just want to say thank you to those who press play and listen. It always is amazing to me how many people listen to the amazing men and women that we have here on the podcast. So truly grateful for you and you being here. I'm going to do an ask real quick. If you find value in the guests that we have, the things that we're talking about, the questions that we ask, I'm going to ask one of two things for you. One's real simple and tangible. Go tell someone else. Share it, whether it's on social media or even just tell someone on your staff or something. Just show them. We're getting close to 300 episodes here. So that means we've had close to 300 really awesome people who choose to be track coaches. And I'm just excited about their journey and sharing it. And what I'm always afraid of now that we're in our fifth year, staring at year 6 coming up, is we've had, guest number 40, guest number 62. Those are really special people that are back in the library. So I just always want to make sure people know about who we've had in the past too, to make sure we're giving them love and respect for what they're doing here. The second thing is, if you want to do something that's a little bit more like seen, a little bit more public, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, there is a way to leave a review. It's like a 1-star, 5-star type of thing, and then a comment or something like that. If you would do that, that'd be awesome. We just use that to show other people maybe to have interest. Okay, enough self-promotion. Let's get to it. Help me welcome the head coach of the University of Missouri, the Tigers, which is one of the most common mascots around. I was a Tiger in high school, so I love it. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Coach Brett Halter. Brett, how are you today, sir?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. I have we're going to talk about a lot of things. I ended my career in the SEC pre-Mizzou and, pre today with OU in Texas. And so I have a lot of questions just about the transition and things like that we'll get to.
Yeah, I didn't know that, man. That's cool.
Yeah. Here, I'll tell the story now. The SEC, this firsthand, is a bloodbath. What a tough meet. I tell the story. The 2 years that I was at Mississippi State, we ran, 3 flat, 301 in the 4x4 and never ran it at SEC. First of all, we just weren't, to win a team title, we were up against it. But it was like, why, we'd already run our open quarters and 2s and 8s and things like that. And it's just, to make the finals, and this was back in 05, it's only gotten worse, was just hard. And then you were staring nationals 2 weeks later, and it just was tough. And I remember when you and A&M came into the SEC, I remember thinking, oh, dude, I thought it was tough. It just got tougher. And now with Texas OU, I was telling one of my friends from one of those institutions, I will name names, and I was like, dude, I just don't think that would be fun. It's literally a mini national. It's a mini nationals now. Now you're adding those guys. We'll get into kind of the transition and things like that here in a little bit, but oh my gosh, I have so much compassion for all of my SEC coaches because it is just a hard meet, and it's crazier today.
But awesome.
Awesome.
It's just awesome. It is just awesome.
I am a self-professed SEC homer. I root for all my SEC teams when they're up against other whatever sport. I truly think if there was a national championship for tiddlywinks, someone from the SEC would win. I'm just a blatant SEC homer, so I love having any SEC coach here. All right, well, Brett, let's get into it. We'll get into those in that journey along the way for you as well, because it's a part of your journey, which is quite fascinating. For you, let's get in our Wayback Machine, assuming, and that's an assumption, that you were an athlete. Where does track and field start for you?
Oh gosh, like a lot of kids, I was first of all, my dad was in the FBI, so we moved around quite a bit and took us out to the East Coast. I was born in California, and my brother was born in Kansas City, and then spent a lot of time in New York, Philadelphia, Philadelphia, South Jersey, South Philly, before Central PA. But like a lot of kids, back then it was I think the presidential fitness test or something like that. Yeah, go run around that tree, and it's like, okay, and back then it was like, you got to beat somebody, right? So I, ended up out in front, and I think the gym teacher was like, "Hey, you should do track." So that's kind of where it started. And that was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. So
So
yeah,
the most interesting thing you said there was dad was FBI. So for people who watch TV, we have this preconception. Uh,
yeah.
Not a lot of conversations with dad. Meaning, what I mean by that is he couldn't tell you a lot of what goes on at work, or
Yeah, yeah, no, a lot of confidential. Even he's 80 years old today and still finding out some interesting things. But back then, organized crime, foreign counterintelligence,
yeah,
domestic terrorism, was kind of like his, what he ended up focusing on. But when they started taking out federal witnesses in the John Gotti case, we moved up in the central PA, kind of got a little Happy Valley, right? That's where I grew up, outside of State College.
wow.
So, a little bit quieter there.
Yeah,
Uh, Still had some of the organized crime elements that would get into the valley that he had to focus on. And then,
wow.
interesting, it was his transfer back to Kansas City, that led me to Missouri. He was actually running the Oklahoma City bombing because Timothy McVeigh was from Kansas. So the
Yeah,
Kansas City office was running point there, and back in 1993. So
that seems like yesterday, but was 30 years plus.
yeah,
I
a
mean,
long time
that's
ago.
we're getting
Sure.
old, Brett. That I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
remember that exact time. I
Yeah.
do remember that.
Exactly.
It sounds like you moved around a lot through high school,
Yeah.
at least. I have a similar history of that. How did I know how I was always the new guy, the new kid at school. How did you handle always being the new person?
Yeah, it was interesting. I, probably didn't think much of it
Mm.
in elementary school, and you're just making friends, But as you probably move from middle school uh, into the high school situation, I think that's when you become really aware. I'm sure you experience the same thing.
Yeah.
Bit like Breakfast Club for the old timers, right? you
Yeah.
know, So, but I'll never forget moving from the Philadelphia area in the central Pennsylvania. We lived on the rural side of State College, so about 20, 30 minutes outside of State College. And first day of homeroom, I never forget the kid, Pete Kerstutter, leans over and said, "Hey man, you're the city kid?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." "Do you chew?" "Chew
Because you're in
what,
the
man?"
country now. Yeah.
"Yeah, chew snuff." He pulls out a can of Copenhagen, some kid in ninth grade, and you know, and he's like, "Do you hunt?" I'm like, "Hunt? Hunt what?" He's like, "Deer." I was like, "You guys shoot deer?" I was like, "Oh man, what
The education of Brett
what like
Halter.
that's what you guys do?" Is like, "Where's the basketball game, man? Like, where's the pickup games happening?" And
were,
no, none of that.
were you I would say the cool kid, meaning your dad's FBI though? Like, was it automatic? Like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, that's cool.
Well, let's say I wasn't invited to any parties.
Oh, you're the
So
narc.
no, yeah, nobody was going to
Oh,
tell me where the party was,
I
man.
didn't think about that. You're the narc. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's not
I'm
happening.
thinking as an adult, like, wow, that's so cool. There's so many questions. I'm not thinking as the 16-year-old going,
Yeah,
oh, whoa, his dad's a Fed. Nah, man,
yeah,
we don't talk to that
yeah,
kid. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a
yeah.
good point.
So,
So, what did you mentioned the presidential fitness test, which I'm not sure if they still do that or not. I don't know.
yeah,
I have kids. I have a eighth grader and fifth grader, and they talk about this pacer test or something a lot, but I don't hear the presidential
yeah.
fitness test. And you talked about competition and you're being out front as a high school track athlete. Were I'm sorry I pigeonhole you. I know you as a throws coach. I'm not hearing you being a thrower. Were you a runner or
Yeah, I
what
was a
was it?
distance runner. Yeah, I was a distance runner,
Oh,
and small school track. A lot of the people in the valley were Amish, so I'll give you some idea. My
yeah, yeah,
best
yeah.
friend lived an hour away by car and no stoplights, so I'll give
Ooh,
you some context how big the
yeah,
area was. But yeah, no, it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday track, and for me
yeah.
it was the 2 mile relay, 800 mile, 3200, and
Wow.
that's what I did. And yeah, so I was you know the worst possible scenario for a throws guy. I was the distance guy.
Yeah. Hey, you're not the only
So
one I know that has done that I'll
Yeah.
call it
Yeah.
transition very
Yeah.
successfully, but exactly. Yeah.
Carrie
Yeah.
Lane, Carrie Lane, man. Yeah.
Exactly.
Same
She
thing.
podcast alum, by the way. She's been on here. If
Yeah.
you're
There you
listening,
go.
go and listen to
Yeah.
Carrie's story. So what kind of track athlete were you? And what I mean by that, I honestly, I don't know. I've never asked the question like how good you are. I don't care how good of an athlete you were, probably because I was a bad one. So I don't care how good someone was or wasn't. What I mean was, like, as you're going through high school career, working with coaches and your teammates, are you the track nerd? And what I mean by that is, you know, all the stats of the people in your area, you know where you rank, you know who the pro distance runners are, or are you the kid who's just like, yeah, I ran track because it was fun, but I don't know, I didn't know what was going on. What kind of track nerddom were you as a high school athlete?
I wasn't. I'm a sports guy.
Mm,
I'm just a sports guy. So, South Philly, South Jersey area. I mean, it was, you're off the bus. It's stick ball, half ball, whatever it was, street hockey, basketball,
yeah.
football in the streets, So it was sport to sport to sport. And so I'm a sport guy and I
Did,
just want to play.
did you play sport to sport to sport, or were you almost
Yeah, no,
purely
I
track?
did as many sports as I could,
Yeah.
a little bit of football, ended up on the golf team somehow, in as a senior,
Wow. Oh, wow.
basketball was my thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
a basketball junkie. So, ask me that question about basketball. I'm going to tell you everything during that
Yeah.
generation about basketball. I mean, during the Philadelphia time, we were out there when Dr. J and
Oh
Moses
my
Malone and Daryl Dawkins breaking backboards and
dude.
Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks, those guys. And so I can tell you all about those guys, but I didn't tell you much about track.
It's fascinating. You move, West Coast all the way to the East Coast, and then in the middle, in between. It sounds like maybe your formative years, you became you're a Pennsylvania guy in this sense. Like when you're talking about
Mhm.
sports teams and culture, is this kind of where you're like?
Yeah.
Would you call that like? I was born in Florida, but I went to high school and college in Alabama. So I say I'm from Alabama, even though I have no family that lives there anymore. I didn't grow
Mhm.
up necessarily there, but that's just where I've spent kind of formative years. Would you say if someone said, "Hey, Brett, where are you from?" Would you say Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm going to say Central PA. I
Yeah, yeah.
mean,
That's cool.
yeah, just, high school and college out there. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it just,
So as we
ingrained, I guess.
before we moved to college, talk to us about the kind of style your coach, and maybe you had multiple coaches in track and field. What kind of relationship did you have? Did you have, spoiler alert, knowing you became a coach, was this a, like you looked up to that person knowing like, hey, I want to be this, or did you want to be an FBI agent like dad?
Yeah, it was FBI all the way. And yeah, but my my dad and others kept telling me, you ought to coach because the point guard on the basketball team and things like that. It was just kind of always trying to direct traffic,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I was in basketball. I found myself very interested in the techniques, how to properly shoot and things like that, and
Hmm.
so I was just kind of into that, and to a point where we were starting a golf team and one of the coaches in the school asked me to come out just to have an upperclassman on the team because he knew he was going to have a young team. So uh, I don't know. I just kind of gravitated towards it, I guess. But I was reluctant. Even coming to Missouri, I came here with no intention of coaching. I came here to get an advanced degree and get in the FBI.
Wow.
So
So
yeah.
it always interests me, high school and college, when we talk to a lot of coaches, when they're high school and college athletes, it typically dawns on them a little later in life that they could actually be a coach. Like that's actually a career, even when it's staring at them
Hmm.
right in their face. Like they're being coached by someone who's getting paid to be a coach. And it's still, it's like, oh, I didn't even think that was a job. Like I'm going to go on to
Yeah.
be a Fed or something like that.
Sure.
So talk to us about the transition from senior year to college. What were you thinking about going to college? It sounds like you're going in to be if you're doing it when you moved to Missouri, I assume going into college, you're thinking about that way. Uh, and where'd you end up going?
Yeah, so it was just again a sport junkie, so it wasn't like I was really taking care of school.
Mm-hmm.
Not like the kids are today. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's quite embarrassing, frankly. I was just, where's the next basketball game, man?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm going through the motions, carrying the basketball to class, and we got a game tonight. like, why am I in history class? We got a game tonight, you know?
Right.
But no, I ended up at a D2 college out by Pittsburgh, Indiana, Pennsylvania, IUP.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so part of the PSAC conference, and
Yeah.
it's just different time, different generation. I was a slow distance runner, but Coach Fry let me on the team and kind of hung in there, and built some good relationships and some teammates I keep in touch with today.
Did you
So
try to play basketball there though?
no, actually, back up. I went to St. Francis College in Loretto, Pennsylvania, right
Okay.
out of high school.
Okay.
Okay, so growing out, both my mom and dad are small college graduates, very
Okay.
small college. St. Mary's for my mother up in Leavenworth, and my dad was a Park College grad in Kansas City.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so kind of encouraged me to look at some smaller schools versus a Penn State, which
Yeah.
is
Right.
quite large. But there I actually tried out for the basketball team, and but I was on a track scholarship. So
Wow.
the coach, I was in the final two, and coach found out I was on scholarship for track, and it was kind of a non-starter. So I
Oh,
wasn't going to give up the scholarship, but it was fun. But
yeah.
then
Yeah.
transferred to IUP and ran there, and coach let me on the team, and you know, wasn't a contributor or anything. But
Yeah. I think it's either FBI or CIA. I read a stat like some ungodly percentage. I almost want to say 80, but that seems ridiculous. So maybe it's, 30, 40%, which would be a lot, are history majors. So were you, and again, I don't remember if that's FBI or CIA. What were you actually majoring in?
well, yeah, there's different avenues. I don't know a whole lot about the CIA or Secret Service, but I know in the FBI, you got a couple different avenues to be able to get access, and one of which is go to law school, have a
Mm,
law degree. This is back then. I think
hmm.
probably the parameters are changing a little bit with technology. So, but or have an advanced degree in something
Mm.
and then work for 2 years, and then you can apply and kind of move
Okay.
through the process that way. So a lot of those men and women are probably as undergrads, English, history, something like that,
Mm.
to prepare for law school.
Right.
And
Okay.
so probably that's the common thread.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
thought it
and
was
that, and that, and that was kind of me too. And
yeah.
but it just didn't. English just not happening. The 3-line sonnet we're talking about for 4 hours. Like what is, like, no way, man. This makes no sense to me. In history, I was like, I couldn't stay awake, man. It was like,
Yeah,
it
same.
was just,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
So what did you end up getting a degree in?
what everybody does, sociology.
So nice.
Yeah. So, just get through it. So
Yeah.
knowing that I'm going to, I ended up in business out here, but knowing
Yeah.
that I was just going to end up in graduate school, I
Yeah.
punted on law school. I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I
I
wasn't
was
not
waiting for
interested.
you to tell me you got a law
Yeah.
degree, which we've had coaches, which that
Yeah.
again just blows my mind. Yeah, yeah. Speaking of English, my best friend in high school, still to this day, it's my brother. Not in English, like just what do we do and talking about this, and they had to write a sonnet one day for English, and he just totally blew off the assignment. So when they go to turn it in, pass it up the rows, uh, he writes his name and he writes the silent sonnet and turns it in. And I was like, oh, Bri, like, dude, you failed that, right? And he's like, you know what? She laughed so hard and said, "What? Don't ever do it again." But I'm going to give you an A this time. And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I was like, that's
Yeah.
brilliant." I was like,
Excellent. Yeah.
I kept waiting in my English classes, like, "Oh, someone, come on, teacher, give me the sonnet because I'm doing this," knowing they already
Yeah.
talked. It wouldn't have worked. But yeah, yeah, I get that. In history, oh my gosh, I don't know how people study that. I just
Yeah.
can't. I can't. All right. So you finish up at Indiana University, Pennsylvania, which what's the other one? I always make fun of Pennsylvania. There's like, oh, in there, California University in
Yeah. There's
Pennsylvania. Yeah, yeah.
Cup. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's always
Yeah.
funny. It's like these,
California.
you're in Pennsylvania and you're Indiana or California. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So you
Slimy Pebble. Slippery Rock.
Slippery
Slimy
Rock.
Pebble.
I love
So
Slippery Rock. Yeah.
this Slippery Rock guys, people will get mad at me. Slimy Pebble.
I
You
haven't
got to
heard
throw it
that.
out there.
I like
Yeah.
that. You end up graduating, you get a degree, which, I think that's actually a really good lesson beyond some certain majors, engineering and maybe some education majors. I was a print journalism major in college, and I
Hmm.
don't know, and I coached for 10 years, and then I'm not sure I really needed that degree to do what I do today. So I think there's a little bit of just like the perseverance and learning how to learn
Hmm.
and the networking of how to learn life with
Yeah,
classmates and teachers and things like that.
exactly.
So I love that you're a sociology major for that. So what do you do next? You get a degree, you ran, everybody's telling you to kind of become a coach. You still have this eye to the FBI. What do you do after you get that undergrad?
Uh, go to grad school,
Okay.
you know, and at this point, my family had relocated to Kansas City.
Hmm.
Hard on, I think probably my brother handled it well, but he was a senior in high school when they relocated.
Mm.
Seemed to handle it well, but he was equestrian guy. So he's like the horse whisperer, you know,
Really?
better athlete than me. But some of the stuff he was doing, you know, we were raising horses on our farm, and
Wow.
you know they'd be born, and he would train them and sell them for 60, $70,000. You know, placing really high at the world championship, and you know,
Wow.
like some of the horsemen that men and women that he competed against actually have uh, are in that show, that Costner thing, Yellowstone. You guys, if you
Yeah.
watch that series, yeah. So there's a couple of clips in there where they're evaluating horses, and you see some guys running out and sliding the horses and turning and cutting and things like that. He knew all those guys, so
Wow.
pretty
That's
wild. So
cool.
that was kind of level he was at, and but he, you know, he seemed to handle the transition well, and
Mm.
got an equestrian scholarship, but kind of gave it up to go in the military. So,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, so but yeah, that took me out to Kansas City.
Okay.
Well, it shifted my attention out to Kansas City,
Right.
and to be honest, you know, that you sorry for the folks in the Northeast, but I think they'll agree that Northeast education, geographic snobbery is quite real.
Hmm.
And, you know, I'm a Northeast guy, so I can speak to it.
Right,
West is
right.
Pittsburgh, California is, you know, and then you go to California. And for all I knew back then, we didn't have social media. You know, I thought Oklahoma, they're still pulling wagons, and
Right.
Texas had funny looking cows, and everything else was corn. And, you know, you go south, maybe hit Virginia, and then you go to Florida and they ain't nothing else, you know, like in deep south was scary. Like I'm not
Yeah.
going down there, you know. You know, you
Yep.
just see
Yep.
the stuff happen down in New Orleans. Like, what is that? You know,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so that was the reality back then when you didn't have social media and you just
Right.
had books and libraries and a little bit of a couple TV channels. And
Yep.
so it was the only school west of the Mississippi I applied to for graduate school. You know, it was the traditional James Madison, George Mason, all those schools up in the
Hmm.
Northeast. And so the week of school was supposed to start, I came out to visit my folks and drove over to Columbia to see campus. So I was like, wow, you know, this is really nice. It's different. And then, you know, the thing that I liked about it, it's still today, it's a classic college town. It's a company town. And so it felt like home to me. It felt a lot very similar to State College.
Hmm.
Not quite as big, but you know, that proximity of downtown to campus, walk right off campus, you're with the coffee shops and boutiques and
Right.
pizzerias and all those quirky things. And um, so, you know what, I'll give this a go. We'll try something different. So that was
Yeah.
1993. So
Yeah. I agree with that. You know, my whole career, once I got out of high school was a very small town. But then, you know, going to college and then coaching, and now here in Champaign, Illinois, my whole life outside of 1 year in Las Vegas was in college towns and absolutely love it. Like I'm
yeah,
surprised when people talk down about college towns. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? You know, depending on the size of the school, uh, it's got everything you want, everything you need. And if you want the big stuff, it's usually not that far from the big,
mhm,
you know, the Chicagos and Indies and what have you,
yeah,
Kansas Cities, et cetera. So I'm in love with college
yeah,
towns and love Champaign, Illinois. So you go to Mizzou. I don't hear coaching. I hear advanced
no,
degree. So
yeah,
is in your mind at this point, 93, track's done? You're like, hey, that was great. Had a fun career.
yeah.
I'm academia now.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, still trying to run and, you know, bike and, you know, spend a lot of time playing, and, you know, you had access to the rec center. So you can a
Hmm.
lot of intramural basketball. And that's where I met Brian Brown, uh, now Dr. Brown.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know the name,
I know
former
Brian
world
very
class,
well. Love him.
yeah, former world class high jumper. And, first day of grad school, this guy comes in on his crutches, and, everybody does the obligatory who you are, and, what you're doing, all that stuff. And, Brian says, I'm training for the Olympic team. Like, well, so am I. I'll probably end up with a hamstring right before Olympic trials. Everybody's training for the Olympic trials, right? And so he said, we sit next to each other. And I was like, so hey man, what's your best in the high jump? He said 7, 8.5. I'm like,
You're like,
oh
holy crap.
yeah, you're one of those guys.
Oh,
And
you really,
so
really training.
yeah, so like, oh man, you're legit. So, but we played a lot of hoops together, and got to know each other. And I was getting bored, with grad school, and your whole life you're doing 3 o'clock. For me, 3 o'clock was game time. My whole
Mm-hmm.
life it was game
Mm-hmm.
time. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing I remember about 3 o'clock. School's over. Where's the game?
Yep.
It wasn't a video game. It was like, where's everybody getting together?
Mm-hmm.
We're doing something. And so that was the hardest thing for me, is like 3 o'clock practice, 3 o'clock game time. That was 3 o'clock, like, and there's too much time. And
Right.
so I just went over to see the track coach and asked to volunteer, and he said no. That was Rick McGuire.
Oh, so it had to
And
be
he said,
Rick, right? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it was Rick. And so I came back to class, and I was just like, man, that track coach's a jerk, man. What
Okay.
track coach doesn't need help,
All right, pause there. First of all, that's funny that you just said that.
Yeah.
We all, well, for those who know Rick, that's just funny. Two, why I'm interested in this because I kind of had similar. When I got out of track and I didn't compete in college or anything, but I called the local high schools when I was up in Chicago and to see if they just needed help. And I played football pretty well. I started and all that kind of stuff. I ran track, wasn't very good, but whatever. But I called the track coach, and I sometimes wonder, like, and made it up to the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder, like, what if I'd have called the football coach to help out?
Yeah.
I could have been a, $1 million offensive coordinator somewhere. So, I was wondering, like, what would happen? Why is you played a lot of sports, you had a lot of interest in sports. Why did you go to the track coach? Why not the basketball? I mean, basketball is obviously
Yeah.
a passion of yours.
I felt like the basketball door was closed. Coming out of
Mm-hmm.
college, I'd actually was trying, I'd gone to the IUP basketball coach to see if I could help out with some camps,
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't get access. I tried to contact various coaches like the Bobby Knights and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
to
yeah.
back then, that's my generation, and see if I could get, just help out with the camp or something. Just felt like that door was closed. Nobody, it
Interesting.
wasn't getting any feedback, just couldn't get in the door.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The track thing, just I hadn't done that yet, so I was like, why not? I mean, I need something to do. Maybe they'll let me help out.
But you go and he says no, so that
Yeah,
he kind of starts closing that door on you.
yeah. So I'm just kind of bitter, and telling Brian, what a jerk. McGuire's a jerk. What track coach doesn't need help, man? The guys are drowning over there, and like I'm not trying to coach. I'm just like whatever.
Right.
And so it took a couple weeks, but he finally encouraged me to go back and ask again. But Brian never told me about Natasha,
Mm-hmm.
his wife,
Yep.
Natasha
Yep.
Kaiser Brown, who was then on staff as a post collegian, still training. And, generally what, Tasha asked for, she would get with coach. So I go back, and it's weird. This time McGuire's like, hey, come on in, do this. Then Brian finally came clean. He's like, yeah, well, my wife, it's Natasha. So that's,
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of how it started.
You know what I love about that story? I'm pretty, my whole passion is uplifting the profession of track coaches. I love the people who choose to be track coaches, and I want from all levels, high school, youth, college, I want to uplift that profession. And so we talk a lot about networking. And, so invariably the USTF CCCA convention comes up, and,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about networking as, we go and we try to meet a Brett Halter, and maybe Brett will be on my reference list. And that's what the typical networking, that story there of, I met Brian Brown, we were just cool with each other, we're just like, I'm not trying to meet Brian, but even after you learned, like, oh, you're legit, like you're a real high jumper and you really are trying to make the Olympics, there wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to be friends with Brian because he'll introduce me to the track. It was just like, I want to be friends with Brian. He was a cool guy. And that's what led to a door opening. That to me is what networking is. What kind of value can you bring to someone else that they think of you when it's time to open a door? And the value you brought was friendship to Brian. Like you know, and I'm sure, with friendship comes a lot of other things. I'm sure you did things for him and vice versa. I love that. To me, like when people talk about networking at like the convention, I go, yeah, go to the convention and find out how you can give value to a Brett or a Mouse or whatever. And then maybe one day they'll think of you when it's time for a job or a referent, not go there. And, how do you automatically, impress Brett so much that he, goes to bat for you? It's like, Brett don't know you. What are you talking about, guys? So I love that story of like, that's real networking, and really we would have called it, just being a human being and becoming friends with someone. So
exactly.
So Rick, I'm going to say, changes his tune. So he says, yeah, you want to help out, help out. So what was the first, like, what are you doing to help out to begin with?
Rolling, putting up high jump bars, rolling shots back to the throwers.
Yeah.
Weight throw doesn't exist yet. It's not reintroduced back to the NCAA. So
is that right? Oh,
shot.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a few years later.
Okay.
Just kind of generally hanging around and ultimately, just being around, kind of what coach says, like, the more you're around and more there's routine, the more we can sort of give you things to do. You know what I mean? Once we know that you're around quite a bit. So then that led to eventually led to helping out with Jeff Pig. Are still close, real close today. Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, and he was our distance guy back then, and
that's right, because you're a distance guy. That's right.
Yeah. And I dabbled in the steeplechase, ran steeplechase in college. So Jeff's more of a middle distance 800-mile guy, and wants to learn about the steeple. So we kind of trying to figure it out, and chasing Chick Heslop around, and getting those kinds of things, trying to figure out, because he was killing it back then in steeple with Weber State, and so that just led into the helping out with Jeff.
So pause there. First of all, I love that you brought up his love in Weber State. That is steeplechase you until maybe recently with Colorado and now other, it's I'm not sure he gets his due for what he did for the sport, 100%. Specifically in that area. Okay. You're going through this. Where is your mindset to becoming a coach? Is this still just a fun thing to do at 3 o'clock because you love the sport and you need something to do? Or is there any part of you that's like, wait a minute, maybe this is what I was born to do?
Yeah, I'm still not thinking that this is a career.
Okay.
This is
having fun.
I'm just having fun, killing some time. These guys need some help. Why not? Yeah. So it was probably, I think it was, so the 93, 94, that was kind of the mindset. By 95, coach then corners me and says, hey, you want to coach? And I'm kind of thinking, well, that's kind of, this is fun. This is cool. I didn't think he was asking the question, do you want to coach full time, like as a career?
Right.
And he's like, I was like,
you want to take the next step in helping us.
Yeah. So this is cool. And he said, well, I need a throws coach. I want you to coach the throwers. I'm like, geez. So first of all, I know the shot's heavy. That's all I know about that. Discus looks like a UFO. Don't know anything about that. I know the javelin would hurt if it hits you, and they're going to introduce this thing called the hammer, and no idea what that thing is. For all I know, it's a sledgehammer. And it's like, well, they don't need a training partner and they need a coach. It's not rocket science. Go figure it out.
Well, hold on. So first of all, your statement of it's not rocket science, not to discredit any other event out there, but the throws are one of the most technical. There's no like you can't like mess up and still be good. And what I mean by that is, if you're a distance coach and you just don't know, let me say it a different way. If you're a throws coach who gets the opportunity to coach distance runner, so this is kind of the flip flop of what you're doing there, and you don't know anything about distance running, and maybe you don't do your due diligence and go learn, and you go, well, it's not rocket science. I'll just make them run. I've heard these guys running 100 miles per week. I'll just make them run 10 miles per day. You might break some kids, obviously, but they're going to improve in some form or fashion, not to their greatest potential, but they're going to improve just for aerobic improvement, right? I can't see that happening on the throw side where you go, okay, I don't know anything, but I've heard of this overweight throwing. So instead of throwing the 4K, I'm gonna make all the ladies throw 12 pounds. And for the guys, instead of 16, I'm gonna make them throw 18. They would not get better. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to
Mhm.
learn. Like there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, it was like in your PhD for me.
Yeah.
I had finished one degree, but I'm not full time at this point, and I need healthcare benefits, so I'm getting my second master's degree in education,
Dude.
and I think
That's a Rick McGuire thing. He's such an
yeah,
educator.
yeah,
I see
yeah,
that influence.
exactly. I actually was in a PhD program at one point, and 2 weeks into it, finally, Joe Castiglione, last thing he did, had leading to Oklahoma, was to hire me full time. I think it was like $12,000 in benefits. I'm like, that's it. I'm out. Got the benefits. I'm good, man. I'm making
I'm
bank.
set. Yeah, yeah. So what did you do? I mean, it feels like almost, knowing Rick enough, and you talk about a guy out there who has helped the coaching profession,
Sure.
Rick McGuire, 100%. It almost feels like it was the type of question, hey, well, I need a throws coach. Do you want to coach throws? That was like set up to like make you make a decision of like, do you want to coach or do you not want to coach? Because if you do, you
Yeah.
need to learn how to do a lot
Yeah.
of the events, not just throw or not just distance here. So it almost feels like it was, I don't want to say a test, but it almost kind of feels like that. Let's see how serious Brett really is.
Yeah. No, he just threw me into it. And that led to everything else too. I mean, back then, people classify, Power Five and mid major and all that kind of stuff. But it's 1990s, man. There was three or four of us, and we're running a full fledged program, and
Yeah,
we
it's
don't have
different
an
now.
outdoor track, and then we got the outdoor track, and so he had me doing everything.
Hmm.
I was telling people that for several Big Eight and Big 12 championships, I was doing the FAT, man, and
Hmm.
coaching. That's how it was.
So what's the first, I'm kind of picturing you're coming from an academic background, meaning, you know what studying means and things like that. So he says, we need a throws coach. And you say, yeah, sure. I feel like at that point he could have said anything. You're like, sure, I'll, give it a try. You mentioned how here's what I know about throwing. The shot's heavy. The discus is a UFO. So what's the first thing? Okay, I need to learn. What's the first thing you do? First person you
Well,
call, book you read. There was no website to go to. What's the
yeah,
first thing?
yeah. It's just mass consumption of anything I get my hands on.
Ah.
So there's not much in libraries, right? And um, it's just talking to people, talking to people. Now, Coach was very engaged in that process, and that he was sending me out to, USA level one. That was,
Mm-hmm.
John McDonald was still alive. I did mine
Mm-hmm.
down at Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Level two, very quickly. I think he helped me fast track that, get out, circumvent some of the years or whatever the criteria was back then. So, um, out of BYU.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm introduced to Lynn Anderson, and
Yeah.
yeah, she was very good. And
Yeah.
then sort of that school of thought around the throws, and then and just invited myself around and just tried to be next to people. 1995, doing stuff like this. So 1995. I was still considered Captain Video, so I was the guy with the big VHS camera. Like this is
Oh
my
man.
pose at track meets, just videotaping people through that little thing, and just a big like the TV people have, but there's no tripod,
There are
it's just
so many people listening who have no clue
yeah,
how you're described. Like, wait a minute. I
yeah,
remember the little, oh yeah, no, man, the big ones.
yeah. No, you had to prop your arm up like this, and you know, but yeah, so like I always give Coach crap because like one of the first things he made me do back in the day was go to the Kansas relays,
Okay.
and back then it was inside their football stadium, and
Right, right.
top row, hey, I need those 10Ks videotaped, back to back 10Ks, like one of the first really hot days. I don't have sunscreen. I totally get sun poisoning, man, but I'm getting our 10K guys round and
Wow.
round. But
Dude.
um Yeah, so by 1995, we're at the NCAA championships in the outdoor championships in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Art Menangus is killing the throws.
Yeah.
Godina, Ogden, Parlin, Powell, um, uh, I forget one of the other women, but they were just like they were dominating. They were going to win the NCAA championship, I think, with throwers. So
Yep,
I just get my camera, just leave it running. I stand next to Art. He didn't know. Whatever he says, that's cool, man. Now it was a bit R-rated,
yeah.
with Art, but I still have that tape. John Godina setting the collegiate record,
Wow. Still
back then,
stands
and
today, right? That's crazy,
I
by the
think
way.
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
we had John on the podcast as well, too. So another podcast alum for you guys that are listening. Yeah. This is and its face value. This next question is going to feel a little dumb because we know you're still a throws coach today, but did you like it initially? Like, because I'm thinking of just, I mean, if I were to pick like the one side to the complete opposite, I might pick distance running to throwers like that. I mean, there's just,
Yeah.
that is complete 180 here.
Well,
I know you, at least eventually, I hope you loved it because you ended up doing it for a career, but like, was there initial like, oh, okay, this is cool? Or was there like, or was this like, okay, you know what, I'll do this. But if I am going to go to this coaching route, which you're still kind of transition, you're not, I haven't heard officially like, yeah, this is my career yet. So was your thought maybe like, okay, I'll do this, but I'm going to sneak back to distance running. That's going to be my ultimate
no, really, it never
identity.
was. I actually fell in love with the throws, and keep in mind, I'm a sports guy, and I really
Right.
identified with the throwers' mentality.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
and the other side of it, I was really blessed with some individuals early in my career. I
Mm,
think of Darren File. I just walked into that guy. This
mm,
guy's here. He's coming out of high school. He's like, I think Aaron Gum back then coming out of high school was number one in the country. Darren was number two. He's a West Kansas kid, 10,000 acre farm.
mm.
That's what he grew up on, right? So he grew up throwing his antenna off the roof. Dad would get mad they couldn't watch TV because Darren's out there ripping the antenna in the fields until he found a used javelin at an auction at some other farm. But
Wow.
he was a great athlete and he just wanted to compete. And, I just identified with that. Like if this is the way throwers are, man, like this is awesome. This is like, and I love the technique. I love the technique of sport. And so, yeah, it was different, but it's technique, man. And it's mano mano. Let's go. Let's tie
Hmm.
it on. Let's go. Let's see who's going to win. And so, very quickly, I'm, blessed with some other athletes that are like that come on board. And, they just had a singular mentality. They just
Mm.
wanted to beat people. And I was like, this is my wheelhouse, man. This is awesome.
Do you, this is a little bit of a fast forward question, but do you think not coming from a throws background, I remember asking Carrie this as well, has helped you become a throws coach? Meaning, you maybe didn't have bad habits or preconceived notions. Like you kind of had to learn it from the ground up,
Yeah.
in an adult fashion, not as a 16-year-old. Like you had to learn it as a 20-something-year-old from the ground up. Do you think that has given you an advantage?
Depends on the perspective, but my perspective, yes. And I
Mm-hmm.
had an aha moment at Ironwood Throws Camp. I had invited myself to
Mm-hmm.
go out there and build a relationship with Bud Rasmussen and Nuke Bart a little bit. And um, at this point, I'm around long enough that Dick Cochran is kind of reintroduced himself to the program. 1960 Olympian, last time USA swept medals in the throws.
Wow.
1960 Rome, and unfortunately, the KU guy Al Otter was the winner. But we won't go there.
That's right.
But and then Ben Plunkett introduced himself as well, and um, man, big human being, really gentle giant, like like most throwers, very
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, gentle human beings. They get a bad rap on the others, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we all go out to Ironwood, and convince. Ben to get out there, and so you got Bill Godina, John's dad,
I love
and,
him.
and wearing discus, the general out there, and Lynn, and then you've got like Ben Plunkett, Dick Cochran, Mac Wilkins, Wolfgang Schmidt, just like just the history of discus
Yeah.
laid out before you, and the way they run that camp. You got your platforms and dividers, and they had 4 or 5 kids, and what they do is that day, Bill and Lynn introduced a drill or something, and the kids were going to work their way down coach to coach. So I just took my camera
Oh,
and
wow.
stayed with one group and just followed them down. And
Oh,
I'll never forget,
wow.
Wolfgang was at the end, and I'd been struggling with to get to your question, I've been struggling with everybody I talked to, they had a have to. No, 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 you have to do this. Well, that's different than what they were talking about,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Uh-huh.
So and this situation was no different, right? So every coach was the same drill, was telling them how to do it different. You have to,
Mm-hmm.
in Wolfgang, well, why are you doing these? These is all wrong. Why this? No, no, no. I do not understand. Do these. And I still have that tape because it defined for me, uh, you know, style versus the biomechanical have tos.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
like, kids like, hey, this kid's doing this nowadays. Everybody can see video instantly. Hey, this guy, no, man, like that's style. Like understand what their body's letting them do, what style is, but look at what are the common threads that every single
Yeah.
world-class thrower is doing, and that's what you have to do. Once we can execute that, who cares how you get there? And so to answer the question specifically, I think it's made me a better throws coach because I don't have any preconceived notions.
Right.
Now, there is no way I know what it feels like to throw 22 meters in the shot.
Right.
Not
Right.
happening.
Right.
Like that's just not happening. Like, and I'm not gonna lie about it. Like I don't have a fast twitch fiber in my body. Like I can have 22-meter, technique without a shot in my hand, but put a shot in my hand, it's all over. Forget about it. And so yeah, so I think from that lens, it's really helped me out a lot.
Yeah.
I enjoy the technique. I try to find what's the best attribute, what's the best physical attribute, uh, what's the silver bullet for
Hmm.
that, the make it go quality for that kid, and then let's build technique around that. And as long as we can adhere to the principles of the throw, we're going to make it go far.
Two things. Really interesting as I'm picturing it, that the same drill, I'm gonna call it 8 coaches, and they're teaching the same person. 8 coaches are
Mm-hmm.
teaching the same person the same drill, and they're saying 8 different things, all positive things. That just like that was that as an educational side, I could see you, like, first of all, you're learning a lot of different cues, like how people use different
Mm-hmm.
words and things like that. But you're also learning about, I think you said the have tos, like, oh, they're all saying a little things different, but all of them are saying that this has to happen, or that, like that just like that seems like an interesting, like, almost like a TV series of like, all right, get 8 sprint coaches, and we're going to teach the first step out of the block, and we're going to the same kid, and we're just going to follow and see how 8 of the best sprint coaches say it differently. Like, I don't know, that just seems really interesting. About the biomechanical side, last week or 2 weeks ago, we had Mike Schofield on the podcast. You and I were talking about this before we hit record, and he comes from a very biomechanics golf background, and I was having a hard time kind of connecting between the biomechanics and the technique style side of it. And the way he kind of explained it, coming from the purely biomechanical side, was every part of the throw has a quote unquote perfect biomechanical side, but there's deviations, there's plus or minuses for each one of those different segments. How the athlete puts all of that together, well, that's the technique and style. So the technique and
Mm-hmm.
style is made up of all these biomechanical rules that you have to be able to leverage here and things like that. And it was just interesting to hear from from you as well, the non, like, oh, I threw, and so that's how I understand what leverage and separation of these are all words I've heard you throws coaches say, shoulder back, things like that. You're coming from it from a different way, and I think sometimes that can be an advantage, honestly. But also the other side, I could see where, like, I've had someone who was a different sport coach when I coached who did the heptathlon. And she told me that she was not a track coach. She was another sport coach. She told me if she chose to coach, say, the high jump, that she would be an automatically better coach than I was because I never did the high jump. And I was like, man, I don't think you have to do, first of all, if you have to do the event to coach it, well, there's a lot of people who won't be able to coach if that's the rule. And I just remember thinking, it's like, man, I can see where she's coming from, that, I don't understand what it feels like to jump or whatever. But I know what it takes to jump. And I also don't have any like physical bad habit, like I always dove in or something like that. That's automatically taken away from me. So it's just interesting. I'm always interested in almost every coach is going to have to coach an event that even if they were a jumper, they didn't long jump they didn't triple jump. So that as a jumps coach, you're probably going to have to coach the triple jump or the high jump. So it's always interesting to me when a coach has to coach an event that they just never did. They saw it and maybe had friends or teammates or whatnot, but to actually do it, you come from a different side, I think, of it.
Yeah, and it's forced me, if you're around me at practice, how that feel. Like it's just like nonstop how to feel, because I want to hear, like I can, I want to hear what they're feeling, so I can try to process that into what I'm seeing the movements look like, and then work with style and the mechanics of the throw to make it all come together. So
you might. So Schofield, I'm going to encourage you to listen to Mike Schofield's. He brought up an academic side of coaching that you just kind of expressed just from coaching. He said a part of learning, I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit. A part of learning is forgetting. So part of his technique is not only a lot of those questions like how you feel, but he'll ask questions of like if he knows an athlete is into cooking. So, what'd you cook last night? Or something. He says that asking something away in between drills and throws and practice throws, taking their mind off of what they're doing, is actually a coaching skill. It was interesting. We don't get X's and O's so much, but it was, as someone who coached for 10 years and, has an interest in it. It's interest.
Yeah. It's going to allow the kid to, turn off their brain a little bit, and maybe you're going to start seeing some assimilation of what you're trying to get accomplished that day. Yeah, no,
like almost a weight of the overthinking that we sometimes have in our young kids.
I remember like a lot of kids, where we'll be at practice, and you got that coach athlete feedback loop where where that they take the movement and you provide some feedback, and in the shots or the throws, it's a really cool circuit, because they throw and they'll listen and then go out and get their implement and they're processing, but when they come back, it's like a lot of small talk. What's going on, I mean, can you believe that team, how bad's their football team, geez, stuff like that. And then all right, it's time to go. And then they're in the ring. And so I can see what that guy's talking about. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Okay. So you're learning to coach throws. You are lucky to have, not only, it sounds like, athletes that are in with you at that time that are good. So maybe, I don't want to necessarily say they're better at technique, but maybe we can make the assumption, but also maybe it sounds like their attitude is right for where you are as in your throws coaching journey as well. How long, because you mentioned something about Oklahoma, because I was kind of starting to assume that maybe you've been at Mizzou the whole time, but you mentioned something about maybe going to Oklahoma. How long are you?
No, I've always been at Missouri.
Okay.
So the Oklahoma's AD, Joe Castiglione, was our athletic director in the early 90s.
Okay.
And going out the door, he hired me as a full-time assistant at like $12K or something like that.
Yes.
And then,
okay.
And then, Mike Alton took over after that.
Gotcha. So. Okay. I the way I heard it was you went to Oklahoma and you're rolling in the dough at $12,000 a year in benefits. Got it. No. Okay. So you take this, because when Rick asked you about coaching throws, this was still, for lack of maybe a better term, a volunteer position. You're not getting paid.
Yeah.
And that rolls into this full-time paid. Okay. Got it. Okay. So correct. When that offer comes on the table, are you, because I'm always fascinated when coaching for the career becomes the light switch. We're like, oh, boom. Okay. All this other stuff that I thought about, that's out the door. I'm a track coach. Is this when it's like, okay, this is the career?
Man, that's a hard question to answer. Like,
are you still trying to figure out when that light switch happens?
It's a blur, because I'm so, like, you're in the moment. and these kids now have a dependency on you
Uh-huh.
to help them. You're feeling that urgency. I'm trying to keep up with them. I'm completely consumed with trying to just get by in school to keep, before I got Joe hired me, trying to keep everything, good there so I can keep my healthcare benefits. But I'm trying to get a second master's degree in the throws. And
Right.
keep in mind, I don't have a background in physiology or biomechanics or
Right.
the technique of the throws. I'm at ground zero and I got to go. And they're got a Big 8 championship coming, a Big 12 championship, when we shift leagues. But yeah, so I think it was almost at a point where there's a cutoff age wise where you're allowed to apply to the FBI. It was
Oh,
approaching that. I was like, whoa, wow, I'm already that old. I guess this is what I'm doing.
wow.
It makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. That's why it's fun to do these type of interviews because, as you mentioned, you're in the moment. So, like if we were doing this interview during that time frame, you'd be like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what tomorrow is, man." So now we
Yeah.
have some separation. We have some look back there. Now, you had mentioned, and I don't know if you specifically mentioned your dad, but you'd mentioned other people as you were kind of growing up, talking about like, "Hey, you should probably coach." How's dad feeling about, like, as you get close to the no turn back, you're not going to be able to apply for the FBI after whatever age. How's dad feeling about this kind of transition that he's seeing, because he's watching from the outside. He's seeing what's going on. How's he feeling about this transition to coach?
They just, my parents are like, find what you love to do and
Awesome.
you'll figure out how to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Don't chase money. Figure what you love to do. It's not really work. So I'm blessed to have that kind of guidance and
Yes.
leadership. So,
Very
and
cool.
like here I am, it's kind of a blur. And I've realized uh, like I'm having fun doing this. Like
Yeah.
it's a blur for a reason because like I'm all in,
Mm,
like it's just a life. Like
yeah. Yeah.
people, what do you do? It's like, well, I don't know. Like this is what I do. I just kind of, hard to separate from me. Uh, and I probably should, you get down in the weeds of mental health and stuff like that. But like for me, it's not a job. It's just who I am and what I do every day, you know?
Yeah.
So
We'll unpack that some more. I love that. Okay, so knowing that you've been at Mizzou the whole time, so what year did you get to Mizzou? Did you say around 95?
93. Yeah.
93. So it's been, doing the math here, 31 years in Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
That's
32,
amazing.
30. Yeah. 30. Yeah.
Yeah. Last year at convention, I was with a bunch of coaches, and we were talking about, we were the consensus was we were railing on how no one stays at an institution long and all this kind of stuff. And we started thinking about the coaches, like Mouse has been at Florida for a long time, and I can't remember who else we brought up. I'm sure I brought up George Williams at St. Aug's. He was there for a long
Mm-hmm.
time and stuff. Curtis Fry until just retiring
Mm-hmm.
here recently. So for 30 something years, that's amazing. So talk to us about, let's do like a quick 30,000 foot overview, and then we'll break down some segments. So start as a volunteer, then get into a paid assistance job for, it's hard to say that, $12,000. And I know this is 90, still, that was no money back in the 90s, by the way.
Yeah. Right.
We're still doing that in some parts of our profession, by the way, and I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely can't stand that. I
Mm-hmm.
can't stand it. Uh, Assistant coach until X year, and then head coach at that year. Where was that transition?
2010.
2010. Okay. And I want to make sure, just for my own personal, when I talk about the transition from Big 12 to SEC, but you also, and I totally forgot about this, you went through a transition from Big 8 to Big 12.
Yeah. Right.
So a lot of people listening are up on today's conference realignments and things like that. Many of us maybe don't even know what and how the Big 8 went to the Big 12. Some of us are probably listening and had no clue there was a Big 8. Talk to us about what
Jeez.
that was. We're old, Brett. We get to an age
Yeah,
where
man.
people don't know our history, for
Yeah.
crying out loud. They fall asleep just like we did in other people's history.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about how did the Big 8 become the Big 12, and what did you, and maybe you weren't even cognizant of it because of maybe the age and stage of your career.
Mm-hmm.
What how did that change? Like, what did you notice the change besides, four more teams, so we got harder or whatever, talk to us about that kind of like the going through that process.
Yeah, the Big Eight to the Big 12. I just remember, my first conference champions in the Big Eight. Life's awesome, and then quickly we're in the Big 12, and at this point, I really don't know anything about Texas and Texas A&M and
Were they
Texas Tech.
Southwest
All
Conference?
Southwest.
Is that what?
Yeah,
Okay,
all
that's what it was.
Southwest.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you what happened to the Southwest Conference.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea. At the same time, Arkansas gets out of Southwest and goes to the SEC.
Right.
Then we pick up Baylor and Tech and all those guys, and really kind of a state of Texas centric kind of sort of league at that point. You had the North Side in Texas. But yeah, no, I just knew the Big 12. That my life became the Big 12, and so then obviously by the time we get to the transition from Big 12 to the SEC, I'm much deeper in the career now, more aware.
Right.
I'm now the head coach, so I have more responsibilities. Assistant coach, you're just kind of focused on your kids and
right.
Day to day. But now, like, the makeup of the program could hinge on, are we going to be in the Big 10? Are we going to be in the SEC? And that was kind of the conversation back then. We knew we weren't going to be in the Big 12, but we didn't know where we were going to be.
Oh,
it wasn't like it was just like for sure SEC, my understanding. And I just remember, Mark Allnut was my sports supervisor. He's now the AD of Buffalo. And every day I'm in his office. Mark, where are we going? Like, we're recruiting now. If we're going to be in the Big 10, we're going to dump our distance and we're going to be power speed.
right.
But if we're going to be in the SEC, we're going to be kind of in bursts,
right.
And that's how we're going to try to make our team. So, so a lot more stressful the second time around than the first time, just because of the role I was in.
And your role, and I'm going to say the role of college athletics, what it was when Big 12 to SEC athletics were different than they were back in the late 90s, early 2000s in regards to, and I'm talking about totality athletics, not just track and field, TV contracts, sports, recruiting, and things like that. Like, it was not knowing a lot about Big 8 to Big 12, I'm going to say the Big 12 to SEC transition was a much, air quotes here, bigger deal. There was more, when I say more at stake, I mean money, to be real frank with you. There was more money involved. Talk to us. I don't know that a lot of people think about what you just said there, because there's a lot of conferences changing, and it's still happening. I literally saw a thing today about, well, the Mountain West is got to figure out what they're going to do if the Pac-12 siphons off teams that way. So that means the Mountain West has got a vacuum that they've got to figure out who and what to pick up, things like that. You talked about the makeup of your team. Talk to us more about that, like the thought process of like, oh man, you kind of give a little bit of insight, like, well, Big 10, and I assume you meant like, well, Big 10 is very well known for distance. So do I really want to go up against those historic juggernauts? So I better make it up a different way. Talk to us about how you think about scholarship allotment, kind of that big picture thought.
Yeah, put it, if you got non-track people maybe listening, it's like your salary cap, so you got the salary cap that you got to stay within. You're a franchise manager, and you got to kind of look at it like that. And so how are you going to build out your franchise? Well, and the kind of what kind of kids are we going to have access to, in the Missouri? What are the strengths and limitations of Missouri potentially? Right. Back then, like, we're very quickly falling behind in our investment in our infrastructure related to track and field at that point. And so it's kind of mission critical that we figure out what we're going to do. And I'm looking at the Big 10, like, are we in a position where we're going to attract initially the kind of distance runner that we need to go up the Wiscos and back then Indiana and
Michigan,
everybody,
Michigan State,
yeah. They're just all like, they were dominant during that period. And are we going to get that kid? And then you look at the power speed element of that league, and you're like, hey, we can make some hay there, because we're in that league, we're the Southern school, and there is a significant weather difference between us and Wisconsin.
For sure.
I'm just saying, sorry, Wisco. I know, Mick and those guys and the whole staff really well, but sorry, man, like, this is different. Yeah. I get it. But inversely, it's in the SEC, life down in Baton Rouge is quite a bit different than life in Columbia, Missouri.
Right.
And the heat and humidity is something that a sprinter and would want to gravitate towards.
Yeah.
But like, does a distance runner necessarily really want to spend all their time in that kind of condition? So we might be able to make some dent into the SEC. Now today, like, there's parity across all the events. So it's
Yeah.
like, you got to get the best kid in the world. It doesn't matter what event they're in.
Yeah.
Go get the best kid in the world that can get the job done. So
yeah, I remember. So my last year was 05 in the SEC, and this was pre Mizzou and A&M, and of course now pre OU and Texas. And I remember, back then you could get a walk on. They still had to be a pretty stout walk on and do a good job as a coach, and they might be able to make a final for you. Still a breathtaking development from the coach to do that. And I remember I was here at Gill, and I'm always paying attention to the SEC. I can't remember if I said this before we hit record or not, but I've said this many times. I am an SEC homer, so I'm always going to pay attention to SEC, specifically SEC track. And when you guys joined, I remember thinking, oh, the day of the walk-on is over. Like, you just don't have enough time, or you've got to upgrade the quality of that walk-on, which means that person probably had other opportunities at fairly financially scholarship styles. So you've got to do more convincing of, hey, come here for a walk-on spot, et cetera. And now with Texas and OU, how do you, I mean, come on, bro. I just, I don't know how you,
no, it just needs to be, it's so elite. And it wasn't easy for me, like, as an event coach, it wasn't easy for all our event coaches to really kind of flip their mind to what is really required. Because, in the Big 8 and Big 12, I mean, give me any Missouri kid on the women's side that's throwing 40 feet in the shot, and I can guarantee you in by year 3, she's going to be a conference contender to score. At what level is going to depend on how that kid progresses. But by year 4 or 5, you expect some pretty significant points out of that kid at a conference level. The SEC just does not allow for that. So the idea of development from the ground up, you have no time, you have no room. And then what's coming at us now, here, whatever year we're in, and the NCAA lawsuit that goes back in front of the judge next week. That is, it's just elite. It's just elite, and there's no room, because you can't sit around and wait 3 or 4 years for that kid to grow up into maybe getting a point. You need a national banger right now just to get on the board. Just to get on the board.
The most important word I think you said there was time. Could you still do it? Sure. If undergrads took 10 years, you're just throwing out a year, but I've got 5 years I can redshirt, right? That's just not enough time to develop these kids to the level they need to be at. What in 05, I remember there were 2 events specifically on the men's side that were just not good. The winners were always good, the javelin and the decathlon. To get like 8th place in the men's javelin, if I remember correctly, like, you just had to throw around 200, 205. Nowadays, boy, 200 men's javelin, dude, what are you thinking? Like, you're not even
can't get on the bus.
Yeah, you're not on the bus.
Can't even be on the roster. You need. I'm looking. I just had a kid the other day ask me, "What do I need to throw?" I said, 230 to 240, and for us to think about it, because it's just a requirement. Yeah, to think about it. But one event outdoors, like, come on. And so, the development objective today is take the best kid in that age category, in that group, at the best 1% in the world, and your development now is to the Olympic podium. That's development. That's development. So
right. All right. Let's pause there. There's some more questions to definitely explore there, but let's go back to this transition of volunteer assistant to head coach. What year did you become the head coach?
2010.
So 2010. First of all, when you got named the head coach at Missouri, and again, we have perspective now. It's 2024. It's 14 years ago. You can kind of look back at. Did you even think that was in the realm of your life? I mean, that's a big deal. Here's this kid who was a distance runner, and you become the head coach of the Mizzou Tigers. That's huge.
Yeah, no, it was never like an objective. Like this is what I set out to do.
Right.
Keep in mind, I'm still trying to learn to throw an event. So it's like I consider it, I'm still today trying to learn to throw an event.
Yeah.
Um, you consume with day to day. I'm still by 2010. I think at that point I just started making $40,000, and you just don't get paid a lot of money, so I'm building houses on the side. I'm moonlighting as a contractor. So, and it's a racket. Once you know the racket, like and I could pay down the debt, get a house and whatever, but no, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
That was an objective, and so even from then, it's taken a long time to kind of settle into that role, because again, you go through a whole nother whirlwind. It's like it doesn't matter what I think every sitting head coach will tell you the same thing. You think you're ready, you have no idea,
Yes, sir.
no idea.
It's one of my favorite topics to explore on this podcast because of that. I, I don't want to call it, I won't call anybody out. In general, I talk to a lot of assistant coaches who say not only that they're ready, they've been ready.
Mm,
And then inversely, I'll talk to a lot of head coaches that were like, oh, bro, you just don't know. You think you
yeah.
know. And on top of that, again, from the seat that I sit in, where I get to interview hundreds of coaches and talk to thousands more, I'm not sure. Let me say it differently. I know we're not developing our assistant coaches to be head coaches either. Like it's a little bit almost like
Mhm.
that rite of passage
Yeah.
of like, yeah, you'll figure it out. Just watch what I
Mhm.
do. And some head coaches very strict with delegation. I'm not going to let my assistant coach handle equipment. I'm not going to bring my assistant coach in to talk about scheduling. The budget, no, guys and gals, you don't need to know. I'll worry about that as the head coach. And those are the kind of things that you have to be able to do as a head coach. And so they don't get any experience until they sit in that seat.
Mhm.
So I have two questions. My favorite questions. I ask it of every coach when we get to the point where if they become a head coach at that point, when they become head coach. So you go through the whole process. They name you head coach. There probably had to be a little bit of like, holy crap. Okay, well, I got what
Mhm.
I asked for. What did you, and I'm not sure it matters which one I asked. They're basically just inverse questions. As you become head coach, what did you think was going to be hard? What did you maybe think like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna have to figure this out, and it actually was a little bit easier than you thought it was going to be? And you think about all the things. I'm going to talk a little bit while you think about that.
Mm.
Think about all the things that, like I mentioned, scheduling, budgeting, scholarship allotment, something that we don't talk enough about. I'm going to use the harsh terms, hiring and firing staff. That's never taught on how you're to evaluate staff and
Mhm.
how you actually are supposed to evaluate and hire staff, things like that. All the myriad alumni support. Maybe, a lot of head coaches are on committees to hire other head coaches of other sports in their school, things like that. You maybe report up to the AD at this point. All these billions of things that you now are your responsibility.
Mhm.
What did you think? Like, oh, okay, this might be a little tough for me, but it actually maybe was a little easier than you thought. Looking back now.
Gosh, I have no idea, man. I don't know.
None of it.
I don't know that I thought anything was going to be easy.
Mhm,
Uh, Inversely, I didn't know some things were going to be as challenging.
mhm,
I think that the blissful ignorance of an assistant coach
mhm,
is what kind of caught me off guard
mhm,
on some of the things that are far more challenging than I anticipated.
mhm.
Um,
Such
you
as,
know, uh, you know, you're right. One of the things I recognize very quickly in the hiring process is that we do a good job on campus everywhere, right? And now you have online workshops probably of training people how to build their resume, sit through interviews,
mhm,
right? Very well prepped,
mhm,
almost completely orchestrated,
mhm,
but nobody's teaching you how to hire.
mhm,
It's not happening,
mhm,
and it's all it's it in and it took a couple times to figure out that, okay, um maybe not seeing this thing right. So I remember
mhm,
um when I brought on Mark Burns. It was a
mhm.
great hire. great hire. We're
Sure,
good
great guy.
friends,
Yeah, yeah.
good friends, and he's the godfather of my daughter. And
Oh, love
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I
Help build
agree.
your cross country course too. If I remember, he and I had a conversation last year.
Heck
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
man.
One of the
And
best cross
Burns,
country courses out there, by the way, if
dude,
you don't
world
know.
class, man. Come
hmm
on, it's the
hmm
best. Come
hmm
on,
hmm
you know,
Oh, yeah.
no,
I'm friends with
it's up there.
Dave Smith and
Yeah,
Zimmerman up in Wisconsin.
I
So I'm not going to get
gotcha.
an argument of the best cross
Yeah,
country course. No, no,
I
no, no, no.
gotcha.
I just
I
know it is
gotcha.
awesome. And Burnsy was involved, so it automatically was like, well,
Yeah,
okay. And he got a lot of him, and I think Lane helped as well, maybe, if I remember the conversation right. But you had a lot of people that got a lot of autonomy to do the right thing. So I hear it's nothing but
yeah,
great. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We're pretty blessed. But
Awesome.
during that process, that was the hire that I remember. Okay, I'm going to flip the script on this. I'm going to turn this thing upside down. The department wants a hiring committee. We got to check all these boxes. That's great. So I'll check all the boxes for them, but I'm going to kind of do it my way. Um, I am not going to allow anybody to sit on the committee that knows anything about track. They're not going to tell you the difference between a shot put, 10K, and 100 meters. They're not going to have a clue. And that's going to force the individual to have human conversation, not
Mm.
track geek conversation,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
come in with your playbook and say, I'm going to do this. And somebody gets all enamored with all the cool stuff you got and all your gizmos and gadgets and all your fast talk.
Yes.
They're not going to allow that to happen. You're going to have to talk at a human level. I
Mm.
had a coach basically cuss me out after the interview that night in the hotel lobby. F this, F that, you effing whatever. I
Because
was
you
like,
set him up. I should say set them up. I
he
don't know
didn't
if
have
it's
a chance to talk about his program and his metrics and how he was going to recruit and how he's going to build the program and how he's going to do all this stuff. And I was like, my first instinct was to, you know, take a swing at him. But
don't you hold on.
back.
I don't want to interrupt there because I love when that kind of stuff happens. I don't like that it happens. What I mean by I love it, when that moment happened, when they got upset with you, wasn't there a little bit of you like, oh, thank God I made the right
Yeah,
decision? Like, really,
that
like
that's
I
the
love when
point.
people
That's
show themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at that point, I didn't feel like I was really fleshing out the real person that was coming in as a coach. And I had to flush out the real true character.
Right.
Boom, flushed it out. So my first
Yeah.
instinct was,
Yeah.
I'm going to crack this guy upside the head. And then wait a second, mission accomplished. This is exactly what I wanted to do. Like, this is exactly that when I'm not around, how's this guy going to behave? How's he going to
Character.
treat the kids?
That was their
You know,
character. Mm-hmm.
yes, that was the
Mm-hmm.
true character. When
Mm-hmm.
when it got hard, couldn't get his way, this is what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not going to set up myself, the University of Missouri, the department, and I'm not going to have the kids in that line of fire. So,
Brett,
so
this is
mission accomplished.
so important for people to hear because to your point about, we polished the resume and all these kind of things. I wish, I can't remember, it might have been Dave Smith. I think it was Dave. Someone I remember telling us that part of their interview, it just kind of happened, like, because you can never quote unquote officially do it this way. They were in an 8-hour van ride from one meet to the next or something like
Mhm.
that, and so they got to just talk. They got to be themselves, not interviewed. I'm
Yeah.
interviewing with Brett, so I'm gonna. When we get into interviews, both sides, and we have this in the private sector here as well. The person who the candidate typically thinks, okay, what is Brett looking for? I want to act that
Hmm.
way. I want to talk that way because I want the job. I mean, you're applying for a reason. You want the job. You think you want the job
Hmm.
anyway. And so you put on this potentially facade. And Brett says, wow, this person said all the right things. I want to, this is the person. And then when you get there, by the way, you could change all these words for recruiting too, recruit and coach, the
No.
facade, everything. And then
Hmm.
when the hiree or the recruit comes on campus and Brett is actually who he is, and the person is actually who they are, and that is not copacetic. Well, now you as the hiring person, you're not happy because it's like, wait a minute, you said X, Y, and Z in the interview, but you're doing this crazy, opposite. So you're not happy. The person who got the job, because now they're themselves, they're not happy. It's
Hmm.
like a disaster that I'm gonna say you both set up from the interview process. So I
Yeah.
like ways that you can get away from the official, the sitting across the table, tell me about your, these
Yeah,
things. Like,
exactly.
who are you? And by the way,
Mhm.
if you're the type, Brett, if you're interviewing someone, or interviewing is the right word probably too, recruiting someone, and they're their authentic self, and you say, yeah, this person's not right for my program, and you decide not to either recruit them further or hire them, that's a good thing for both people. Like,
100%. Yeah.
you, the person who thought you wanted to work for Brett's like, oh man, I, I dodged a bullet. Like, I wouldn't be happy. Thank God he didn't
Mhm.
hire me. But instead we
Mhm.
do this. Well, I want to work for Brett. I want to work for Missouri. I want to work in the Power Four,
Yeah.
whatever, these status things that we think we need to have
Mhm.
validation. And in reality, it's like, you're going to be miserable. Be
Yeah.
yourself. And if you get hired, awesome. If you don't get hired,
Yeah.
that is awesome too, by the way. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important for people to hear. Assistant coaches that are aspiring for what they think is the next greatest level, and for head coaches when they're interviewing people. Don't be who you think that other person wants to see. Be yourself, and the right things will happen more often than
Sure.
not. So that's a great
Yeah.
story, Brett. That's awesome. I love
Exactly.
that. That's a great example. Who when you, and you followed a pretty legendary person there at Missouri as well, so you had some great examples and maybe mentors in front of you, but who and you answer this how you want to, because I'm gonna say who, but you don't necessarily have to name a name here, but who was your phone a friend? Who was your, like, oh, okay, well, I got the job, I need to call so and so, hey, how do you do it, what am I in for, what was your, like, the mentor
Well,
side?
as head coach,
Mhm. Yes, sir.
yeah, yeah. Well, coach, Coach McGuire is like,
Yeah, yeah.
I remember the first year. Hey, coach, you ever done this? You ever had this experience? No, no, never had that experience. Yeah, thanks, coach. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, bounce a lot of things off coach.
Mhm.
Jeff and I are still pretty tight, talk a lot. Um, and so Jeff has a wealth of experience, so things like that. But yeah, really just bounce off, those guys. And then you have some peer friends that you talk to.
Mhm.
Um, get a lot of value from, probably, you get all these, like, it's almost like politics. You identify who you are,
Mhm.
whatever, who you talk to a lot. But pick up the phone. There's some old timers I try to fleece for information because they've done a lot in the sport, you know?
Fleece for information. I love that. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
man.
shake you down. Give me the magic.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what what about this? When we talk about the makeup of head coaches, um, we tend to think that distance coaches make the best head coaches because of the nature of coaching, meaning there's more unsupervised time coaching distance runners. Meaning, if I send them out on a long run, I'm not going out there for their long run. Again, almost this exact 180. The throw side seems to be more of the exact opposite. There's very little, and this comes from naivety of not coaching throws. So you may, challenge this and tell me the truth here. There's maybe very little that the throwers can do without having the supervisor there for many reasons, the
Hmm.
technique, safety, making
Safety.
sure there's an
Hmm.
adult things there. So we tend to think that throws coaches are maybe have a harder time becoming the head coach because, again, the purview of the head coach is the overall program. I know plenty of throws coaches that are literally 8 in the morning till 8 at night because they have
Hmm.
all these different groups. And sometimes I think that's a little bit of you're doing this to yourself. I know there's some necessity there, but I'm a
Hmm.
little bit, sometimes I'm like, you could do this differently,
Hmm.
bud. But how have you handled coaching throwers? So a lot of different events, a lot of different techniques, etc., and the responsibility of the head coach.
Well, first thing I did is fire myself as the throws coach. So,
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Now, now
yeah,
that's hard, I would imagine.
yeah, no, it was hard. Like, I had a couple very good female throwers. I just kind of want to see them through their end. And
Mhm.
then transition was difficult, but was able to bring on a throws coach. Today, I try to focus just on the javelin, which it fits out perfect because it fits well. It works out perfect. Is that outdoor only. They're typically in the thrower spectrum, kind of I don't want to say cast aside, but you know, as a throws coach, you got the urgency of indoor with the shot and weight,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
then outdoor, and
mhm.
you know, hey, just go do those things, go
The
do your drills. But
non-rotational side of it, even
yeah,
though there is, I know there is
yeah.
some rotation, but it's not a round and round event, right?
So you end up being consumed with what's in front of you. So, um, but it, you know, it's outdoor only allows me to be around cross country a lot, you know, and the development of that side of our what we're trying to do there, and so I get to travel with them a little bit, hit some practices indoor. I can, you know, indoor we're lucky in our locale here that we got a lot of nice indoor tracks that we can access quickly, including our own now that
I'd
we're
say
excited
big
about.
upgrade. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, pretty significant. But you know, I could stay behind on a late Thursday or
Mm,
even, you know, Friday morning and still work with them and then get down to the meet wherever it is and
mhm.
still get there in time for the contest. So it works out well.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's how I've done it. Just because what I was finding is like, you know, we're transitioning into the SEC, and the and this is what you just don't know. You
Mm,
don't know the volume of work. You don't understand how
mm,
much time you need to spend with the executive staff building allies for the program,
mhm,
and recognizing that, guys, we look we're not an SEC school right now.
mm.
We are not built out like the SEC. Like, we need investment, and we got to invest fast and heavy and hard, and we got to make some changes. And that's my responsibility. And
Right.
it takes time. It takes time to get out there and build those relationships. To you know, it's not like you know, Missouri's a cash cow. You
Mhm.
know, we have a lot of demand for the entertainment dollar in this state with all the professional sports on, you know, between Kansas City and St. Louis,
Right, right.
and you know, and you know, so we got to work hard, and so I found it like quickly nothing could afford to be average. And, you know, the coach at a world class level, man, you're all in with the throwers. You are just
Mhm.
consumed. You know, you talk to a throws person, like you're off topic like for a second, you're back on throws. You go off topic, you're back on throws.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And that, because that's the world that men and women live in,
Right.
and I couldn't afford to do that, so I need to get out of it, and you know,
How
and
do you
have a
that
great one now. So
that seems hard. Having the right staff, I think, is hard because I think about too. You talked about the makeup of your team. If you're gonna because again, we have only so many scholarships. It's budget allocation here. If you're going to de-emphasize, as an example, not an example here at Mizzou, but as an example overall, if you're going to de-emphasize, I'm just going to say the distance. Sorry to pick on you, distance runners. But if you're not, if you're going to say, hey, I'll put, one scholarship into the whole side of it, well, then you have to think of, as the head coach, well, I don't want to necessarily go out. First of all, I'm not going to be able to maybe attract quote unquote high level coach, because
mhm.
they're going to need some support, and we're choosing not to give them support in scholarship. Um, but I have to be careful. I don't want to go out and hire some gunner that wants to come in here and say, oh, I'm going to recruit all the best kids. Like, you're going to get them on 10% because you get to spread this out. So you have to
Mhm.
make sure you're choosing the right person that's going to be satisfied and do a right job in
Yeah.
the setup that you have there. You, as a throws coach, going out to hire a throws coach, I'm assuming this had to be a little bit more difficult. One, more about that position than, say, the distance coach, head coach, who's going to hire a throws coach. And I would have to think, as the interviewee, as the person who wants the job, I would be a little intimidated. Like, oh, I'm going to be the throws coach for Brett. Well, I mean, he knows more than I do, or at the very worst, the same amount. Like, he's going to
Yeah.
be over my
I,
shoulder.
I don't know. That's the case, man. Like, that was pretty, like, come on.
You've
Like,
had
like,
success in the
yeah,
throws that you're
I've
enough
had,
of a throws guru. Okay.
I've blessed to have kids that overcome my coaching. How's
Oh
that?
boy.
Yeah.
I love
So,
your humility. I do love that.
yeah. So,
I also am a
no,
huge believer in coaching, so you're not going to get over me and say that. Here's the thing: you're not saying this. You're getting real close, though, Brett. I don't like, Ken of Auburn says this more than anybody. I dislike when a coach says, "I'm just a bus driver." I'm like, oh, is that true? Well, that means we don't need you. And that's not true. Like, what you do as a coach is extremely valuable, not just the technical side, but everything else that you go to pouring into these young people, right? So I do appreciate your humility, Brett. However, you have done a great job coaching your
Well, I
events.
appreciate
I'm
that.
not going to allow that to
I
not be
I appreciate
recognized.
that. It comes more from we can take a deep dive in the sports psych and stuff. So it comes from a sort of an autonomous approach. If it's to be, it's up to me is a really
That's
big
part of your
thing. Yeah,
sauce. I
yeah,
agree
yeah,
with you, but that's part of,
yeah.
not everybody's doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
This is part of it. So
Getting the kids to understand that understand that mindset and take ownership of that mindset is really critical.
agreed.
That, like we are trying to build an independent athletes inside of
Mhm,
our program versus
mhm,
dependent athletes.
mhm.
So I certainly
So,
don't want to
so
take credit for their successes.
and I'm not asking you to do that. I'm with you on this.
Mhm.
So how do you get back to my original question here? How do you know what you're looking for? I'm gonna say you're particular, and that's a positive here. That's not in the negative
Mhm.
here. How do you go out and hire someone to coach the majority inside of your own events?
Well, I've been blessed to be around a lot of great people. And I mean, come on. Like, I am not going to argue that our throws coach today, Robert Weir, that I'm a
Yeah.
better throws coach than Robert Weir,
Sure, sure, sure.
and what a human being,
Agreed.
he's a good human
Amazing.
being. And, and I knew that. I knew what I was getting with Robert, and that was easy. Robert, you want to be a throws coach? I'll stay out of your way. I won't,
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
it's good.
yeah.
So
All
yeah,
right.
no, that part was pretty easy just because of I guess I am old, been around long enough, and do have a peer group out there that I can, make some phone calls to.
Yeah.
So
All right. I want to talk about, I don't necessarily like talking about athletes too much because I don't want to get wrapped into the coach. That's the identity of the coach, because you've had many, many great athletes. Um, and I don't pay enough attention to it, so I can't rattle off. But you had someone that I've had interaction with, so I do want to talk about. And he was special. And you've had many specials. So I'm definitely picking one out of a big bucket here. Christian Cantwell. You were able to work with Christian. Talk to us about, because I mean, a special guy. I love him. A special talent. I mean, he did a lot of good things. I still remember we used to host a throws fest here, and he came over. And it was kind of a little bit of a surreal moment. Jen Scher was jumping for the world record in the pole vault. We did pole vault and shot put at the same time. Christian threw the world lead in the shot. It happened at the exact same time. And I remember I was right in the middle of it. And I was like, this is pretty, like, I got a pretty cool gig here, what I
yeah,
do.
that's
So
cool.
I love
Yeah.
Christian, love talking to him. Talk to us about, what was it like to work with a guy like Christian?
Well, he was on that first gen of kids, the Darren File, Russ Bell, Micah Shanks, there was a couple women as well, but those guys were the ringleaders. And, I remember a guy like Russ Bell, coach, don't talk to me about technique. What place am I in? Well, you're in seventh right now. He's like, what's the leader? How far do I have to throw? Whatever. And that's like, 2 meters farther. Okay. Boom. Where am I sitting now? Well, Russ, you're in the lead. Okay, good. Keep me posted on how that's going. Don't talk to me about technique. What place am I in? So that mindset, like especially for a thrower, they can get consumed with technique. What's wrong? What's
Yes,
wrong? What's wrong?
yes.
Versus just go compete, just go beat somebody, just
Right.
throw it far, figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And those guys taught me a lot. And I didn't, and Christian was a big part of that. Those guys just wanted to compete, play the
Mhm.
game. Um, Christian was a special character, though. Very, it wasn't easy all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
keep in mind, this guy um, is from Eldon, Missouri,
Mhm.
which is a very small town near the Lake of the Ozark.
Hmm.
So too was Frank. You go all the way back. This is an interesting story most people don't know about. So we don't have internet, right? We're waiting for like track and field news to come out and look at the rankings and stuff. And there's a long delay.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
Russ Bell was amongst the national leaders, top 5 in the discus his junior year, and highly sought after. And we were able to sign him early, so we were very lucky. The terrific pickup, and it was amazing. So now we're in the spring of Kansas Relays. We're at
Hmm.
Kansas Relays. Steve Fritz is coaching at K State. He's like, "Hey, tell me about this Cantwell kid down at Lake the Ozark or down, Missouri." I'm like, "Nah, you're thinking about Russ Bell." Because what's the likelihood? Because he's telling me the marks. I'm like, "No, man, that's Russ Bell." He's like, "No, I think it's Cantwell." Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what's the likelihood Missouri's going to have
Right.
two national leaders within 20 minutes of each other? These two towns were 20 minutes of each other.
Right.
And so I get home, not thinking anything of it, and I get a call from an angry citizen in Eldon, Missouri. Why aren't you recruiting Christian Cantwell? I was like, well, I thought he was a rumor. No, he's not a rumor. He's a real person. So I call the high school and get the coach on the phone. He's like, oh, you're talking about Biggin. I was like, yeah, I
Big,
guess. He's
yeah.
like, well, he's sitting right here. So I talked to him. He had a meet the next afternoon, and I drove down to see him throw. And um, you know,
The rumor was
uh,
true.
the rumor was true. He's a giant human being, and he's self-taught in the spin from memory, because there's no videotape. So he remembers how a guy named Scott Bartlett was throwing out of Warrensburg, who was being coached by a very good thrower at the time, how to spin. And so Christian's trying to remember that, and he's just trying to make it work. And he throws 55 feet off his shoulder going down. Like, it was just like a trajectory straight down, and it went 55 feet. And I was like, called coach. I'm like, oh, this guy's legit. We got to get this guy up here. So he came up on Thursday, very quick turnaround, got him up on campus Thursday, Friday. And we don't have any money. We don't have any scholarship. And Jeff Pitt, I'm still kind of working with Jeff, and Jeff had just given away our last bit of money, our salary cap. And we had this really long hallway. And Brian Brown is kind of helping us out a little bit in the high jump. So he meets Christian out front. He starts bringing him down this hallway, and Jeff walks out of his office and looks way down the hallway. And Brian's a pretty tall guy.
Yeah.
Brian looks like a little tiny character next to Christian.
Wow.
And Jeff goes, oh my gosh. Walks right back into the office, calls the kid, and said, we got to pull your offer. Sorry.
Shut up.
Yeah. So we signed Christian for like $100.
Oh, first of all, that's amazing. Second of all, there's a person out there right now that is telling their poker buddy, yeah, man, Mizzou offered me and then just pulled my scholarship.
Yeah. That was for Christian.
I hope they know, but it was for Christian though.
Yeah. And so, the kid only threw Christian, and I kid the man now,
Yeah.
Christian back then, he was 60 foot 1 inch in high school.
Wow.
But and Conrad Woolsey, the 5'8" kid, the other kid in State of Missouri, he's beating him at 63 back then. And back then, those are huge marks. Huge. Yeah. And so you got the 6'6" giant and the 5'8" guy just getting the 5'8" guys as well on because of technique. And so he comes on board and he's just like, it was hard, trying to figure out what the technique was going to be and trying to figure out how to do it. And, we're looking at videotape, and we're like, and at this point, I really don't know. I don't say I know much now, but I know more now than I knew then.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this was Christian feeling stuff and what do you think? And let's try this. And he had a lot of physical ailments as well. Almost 4 near herniated discs in his back coming out of high school.
Wow.
We're immediately putting fake cartilage in his knees, synthetic disc in his knees because he didn't have any cartilage left.
Genetics or football or
high school football? Yeah.
Yeah.
Really beat up. And
that's interesting.
Small town, small school, and maybe didn't have the knowledge that we have today. So, equally challenging trying to build a guy. Helping him build his technique around his physical ailments, it was especially challenging as well. But, he figured out a lot of stuff. And, and I was trying to help and, suggest things and do my own studying and offer. And then, he would see something and what do you think about this? And it was like, he really bought into the ownership part of it. And then the next level for Christian, which I just wish we could force feed on everybody today, he wasn't in it for the stuff. It wasn't in it for the stuff. He very singular objective, and I share this with the kids all the time. This is our objective, to be so good that on our worst day, we can't be beat.
Huh.
That's how good I want to be. I want to be so good that on my worst day, I can't be beat. And that's what drove him every day.
Wow.
I want to be the best in the world. And, to a point where he came back from his first indoor world championship he'd won. It was coming out of Moscow. And we're at the indoor track. And I think it's like, I don't know, some holiday or Sunday or something. The lights are off. I don't have access to the training room. He needs tape. He's like, oh, I think I got some. he starts dumping out his bag and get, typical thrower's book bag, right? You get nasty shoes, moldy stuff, just
Chalk.
rank, yeah. And this metal thing falls out of his bag. I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, that's what they gave me over in Russia. I'm like, you mean
His
your freaking world
medal.
championship medal? He's like, yeah, you want it? I was going to throw it out.
Shut up.
No, it's truth. It's the truth. And like, Terry, when he got connected with Terry, she would make him keep that stuff because that was not his character. He was not
Right.
about stuff. He's not about being out in front and telling the whole world that who he is. And look at me, I'm wearing my USA gear. People get that stuff and they wear it like a badge of honor and they never let go of it.
Yeah.
He'd be the last one to tell you how good he was. He wants to talk to you about fishing, where the good fishing holes are and all that kind of stuff. So
that's a yeah. Sorry, I was just going to interrupt that we allow things to become our identity, and I'm hearing that he did not allow that to become his identity. He knew who he was and what he enjoyed, and it wasn't for the medals. Yeah.
Yeah. So he, like, for someone like that's just a great he's a great example. Forget about the throwing accolades because I mean that's what sets up the story.
Yeah.
All the stuff that he had to overcome. He never quit. He never gave up.
Right.
He built a technique and a style
Yeah.
around the things that he had tried to do, but he had to work around all the physical ailments. He didn't stop, and he got to a level that he was very feared. If he was healthy, people know they're hard to beat, and had a terrific run in the sport. But he did it in a way that was for all the right reasons, and he didn't let the sport create, like you just said, his identity. So he had a much bigger identity than just being Christian Cantwell, the shot putter.
Yeah. It makes his career more impressive to me, knowing how banged up the body was coming out of high school. I mean, these guys, I remember asking, oh my gosh, he was the throws coach at Indiana University and became the head coach for a while. Oh my gosh. He was one of our better discus throwers.
Oh, Randy.
Yeah. Randy Heisler. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Randy a long time ago, I was like, hey, so why'd you stop throwing? And he's like, I was tired of hurting all the time.
Yeah,
and it always kind of resonated with me, especially with throwers. But I'm like, I remember asking Gadina the same thing. He's like, yeah, man, my knees, just carrying so much weight and doing all these things. So to know, Christian's very long, successful career, knowing that, man, off the rip, he was hurt and had a lot of things going on as an 18-year-old, for crying out loud. Makes me think, with that kind of experience and that kind of mindset, when we talk about identity, one of his roles and identity today is dad. And, his son Jackson is, phenomenal, one of the best athletes around, blowing Christian's marks at his age out of the water now. I find out. Yeah.
It's
it
amazing.
makes Jackson's very engaging in on social media. I always, for me, when an athlete engages with me, I'm always like, I don't do anything for you. Like when a coach does, it's like, well, yeah, I'm working to advocate for you. An athlete, I'm like, I can't do anything for you. I'm not a coach. I'm not gonna be able to give you a scholarship, all these kind of things. And Jackson interacts. And what I'm really impressed with, Jackson as a teammate that this may be the dumb statement here, not as good as Jackson, because no one is, by the way.
Yeah.
He gasses up his teammate more than I have seen any high school. It's like, to me, that shows like leadership and humility. Like, that kid could easily be, hey, it's all about me, because, oh my God, it's all about him.
Yeah, that's cool. No,
he
just think about
a leader.
Yeah, well, you think about mom and dad there. I mean, and what dad's going to bring to the table for his son, and what mom's bringing to the table for her son. And Terry is, didn't get the world accolades, but let's remember she was an Olympian,
stud,
and
yes,
just an extraordinary explosive. Like, I've never seen a female as explosive as her. I mean, I don't remember, she won the USA indoor championships from a stand throw, like 18, a little over 18 meters, maybe. I can't remember. Coming off an Achilles heel surgery, so she couldn't, or Achilles tear or something like that. So she couldn't do a full glide. She had to do a stand, still won the championship, different time, but still impressive, right? It's still amazing.
For sure.
And then, and an amazing coach. Like, people forget that, she coached, she was, down at Oklahoma State for a while, and she was, and she'd worked our camps for quite some time. And I don't know that there's a better person that I've ever been around that can teach the front of the ring as well as she can on the
Hmm.
delivery of the shot, especially
Hmm.
for the glider.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely extraordinary in a way that the kids can really identify with it, pick it up, and turn it into a movement.
Hmm.
So,
I love that. That's great. And I just wish them, all the family, I just wish them the best of luck in the world. They're going to have a lot of decisions to make. And I have a feeling we're not going to see Jackson, unfortunately, in our sport because he probably is going to make a lot more money in the NFL. And bless him. That's great. Maybe he'll be the guy that brings back dual athletes even as professionals.
yeah,
That would be amazing, actually.
Jonathan Ogden did it. I mean,
That's right.
certainly,
That's right.
Jackson. I mean, I no, I think that what I think while looking at this thing, I can't speak too in depth on it, but I think that he wants to do both.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I think well, he ought to. And
Absolutely.
football's going to drive the ship for this guy, but if they're just good human beings, they ought to be letting this kid do this thing. I mean,
That's
come
right.
on.
That's exactly right.
And let's and Mr. Carter's paying attention, right? He was
Hmm.
Robert's roommate in
Hmm.
college,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so I think every time Jackson throws, Michael's on the phone with Robert, and what do you think? Is he going to get there? And
Wouldn't that be so
and
cool?
but
We've
Michael
had
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Michael
that's
did
right.
it.
Michael's another one. That's right. We've had so
Mhm.
many kids getting close to that mythical, I say mythical because it's just far out there,
It
high
is.
school record. We've had some
Mhm.
kids getting so close, Vina and
Man, it was
Krauser.
so
And it's like,
hard.
I want to see, I love that. I love legacy. So I love Carter's legacy in it, but man,
Mhm.
that's a record I want to see down. Hey, in the interest of time, I want to do a little bit of rapid fire here because I want to get some feedback. The other athlete I wanted to talk about was, and I probably can't pronounce her name right, Schweitzer, Karissa.
Karissa,
Yeah.
yeah, Karissa Schweitzer.
What I'm interested in, one of the best distance runners in America, and collegiately for sure. I wondered when she was running and running well, you have a background in distance running. Was there any click of like, maybe I should be working with her, or did you have input? Like,
Oh,
how did your
no,
distance
no, no.
background when you had this stud? And you've got a lot of studs here, so I'm just picking on
No,
Schweizer.
no, that's no, that's all Mark.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all Mark. Like I
Okay,
stay out of the way. I like
okay.
that's not that. Like I don't. No, I'm not doing that.
You're fully
Like
morphed into throws. I love it.
no, well, but the, Mark's the lead coach back then,
Yeah.
and that's his responsibility. And I'll give him some observations as she was transitioning. My experience is someone like Christian or Bell or Kirsten or whoever those kids were, as they go from sort of developmental into the next level onto the elite level. And what are those transitions like, and what can you anticipate, and how your coaching changes, and the emotional you get the sort of the physical piece of it, but there's an emotional piece, your emotional investment, how
Mm,
that evolves and
interesting.
changes, and the demand of it is far different when you got the kids that are getting at that super level.
Right.
It's a way different type of coaching. So no, man, it was that was all Mark, and
That's cool.
he did a great job with her because, like, we, for another interesting story, like, if people are watching, you know, Missouri, Kansas, if you don't know the rivalries, much like Duke, UNC, or
Big.
Michigan and Ohio State. So, and it dates way back.
Mhm.
And I foster it, and Doug Reynolds got married at Rimrock, and good friend of mine. So I go
Mhm.
over to his wedding,
Podcast
and,
alum.
and
Mhm.
yeah, and Coach Timmons is down there saying, "Ain't no Missouri truck coming up my lane. You're walking, son." I'm like, "All right, here we go." But you kind of love that stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When I pass the Lawrence sign, I'll let my dog out and go to the bathroom. I'll take a picture of it and send it to Doug. Just a reminder, like keeping it going.
Just a
Stoke the fire.
reminder.
Yeah, just stoke the fire a little bit.
I
But
love it. I love it.
um,
That's fun.
man, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. I get
Uh,
all hype.
you had a good
Hype.
story. Maybe that was the story. It was awesome. That was good. Let's keep going because we had
Yeah.
time. I want to be cognizant of your time. My next question was: I said we put a pin on the recruiting and scholarship allocation. I'm curious, and you will be forgiven and have all right to say I don't know because the Ohio State AD made a great statement when he was talking about all this stuff that's going on with NCAA. He said it changes every 30 minutes, and if that's the Ohio State AD saying that,
Mm.
God bless. What are you anticipating with the 45 roster cap. I'm trying to state it that way instead of the 45 scholarships, because I think we'll be maybe building up to that in general. But how do you foresee recruiting, roster management? It involves a lot of things, budgets, not only scholarship budgets, equipment budget, et cetera. How do you foresee? You mentioned javelin thrower, so that javelin thrower might be on the 45 roster outdoor, but not the 45 indoor, which means there's a different person. There's a lot going on here. What are you foreseeing in this at this point?
And man, we're trying to see through the trees, and it's tough. I mean, our head coaches meeting down in Birmingham, the SEC head coaches, we have to meet in person, and that was a very dense meeting. A lot of just a lot of hard conversation, and there's like the people in that room. I kind of got a little upset yesterday, or maybe it was yesterday. I can't remember that. We're often in the SEC, we're often criticized. We're just trying to, hoard everything and get everything to just for us. And, we're just trying to leverage everything
it's all your
for
fault.
the SEC.
All this is the SEC's
right.
fault. Right.
And, people don't recognize, I get it. I've been through the evolution of Missouri when we don't have anything and evolving to where we're more like the other guys. But I'm also a little offended when I sit in the room and you have people that are very invested in the collective sport. They really have the best interest of the sport. Listening to in the experience in the room, and listening to Mike and Edric and Coach Henry and Coach Price and Carol and Leroy. I mean, you're kidding me, man? And they want the sport to be around and survive and be great. And so it was dense, man. It was heavy. It was a heavy conversation about what's happening next and whatnot. But yeah, I think that the roster is going to stay at 45 per the lawsuit on the women's side. I think a lot of conferences have the ability at the conference level to maybe choke down that cap if you want. And I foresee that happening across the country, because you got to balance out all these numbers,
right?
And you just, for you got a lot of things at play here. They got that athletic directors have to balance out. But the scary part is athletic directors are going to have to make hard decisions. If you're at our level, and you're going to buy into that $22 million payout, that's $22 million is coming from somewhere. We're just not making money, right? It seems like you got donors just giving away money, but they're getting stressed. They're getting exhausted. They're running out of money. I can't just keep giving you money.
Right.
And so when you talk about constrictions at a conference level, that we want to keep the sport around, but we might have to choke down the men's roster even further to save money, or worst case, we might have to punt on the sport. That's what's scary. And we don't know yet what's going to happen. And everybody's getting creative and trying to find ways. We're starting to see things open up. At Missouri, we stamped the field with 2 sponsors, which is, you weren't allowed to do it in the past. Well, that's some additional revenue. So that's positive, and that's tough. It's tough when you hear, Ross Bjork came to Missouri, so know him a little bit.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah. And so he's running point on one of the wealthiest athletic departments in the country. And when he's coming out saying we're going to have to fund sports at an intramural level, that's alarming. And, I was on a conference call yesterday trying to explain to people that, unfortunately, the thing that drives everything now is market value. And in my opinion, as a sports guy, I'm a track guy, but as a sports guy, we don't have a great market value.
Track and field.
Yeah, track and field. Our market what is our market value for televisions? And you've watched other sports, I see other sports, and I'm kind of get anxious about it when I watch women's gymnastics, softball, volleyball have adjusted their sport to increase their market value for television package. And here we are operating exactly the same way we always have. We're talking about the minutiae of the sport, but we're not talking about the sport globally on making some massive adjustments to gain market value for the casual onlooker. And I use the Omaha as an example. Look how many orange shirts there were last year in Omaha for the NCAA baseball championship. You can't begin to tell me that every person there is a baseball fan.
Right.
Tennessee fans. You
Yep.
can't tell me that every person that goes to a Missouri home football game at 70,000
Right.
is a diehard football fan.
Right.
And they're watching the game like we watch track at the
Yep.
judo like moves the left tackle's making on the rushing linebacker. Did you see that? No, man.
Right.
My team beat their team. That's all. Let's
Yeah.
go have a beer.
Yeah.
That's all they care about.
Yeah.
And so the changes, I hope for our sport that it's not too late.
Yeah.
That's what I hope.
You brought up a good point. I always point out that, on the high school level, when you had boys and girls track together, it's the most participated sport there is, more than football, basketball, et cetera. On the college level, the same thing. When you had men and women's track together, it is most participated sport over football, et cetera. Meaning, you and I, when we walk through the grocery store, we're more likely to bump into someone who had some form of track background than we are who played football or basketball, et cetera. Yet, we haven't figured out a way to get even those people to a track meet. But, and you brought it up perfectly, the person who never played football, they're going to a football game or a basketball game or a softball game, volleyball game. That's a great point. We've got to figure out, we have a huge pool of people who've had some background in our sport. Start there. How do we get those people there? And I think that will attract the casuals. So but we got to change. We got to do something different, and that's the hard part in our sport.
And it's not niche. We got to get to what our public values, and it's mano a mano. Like my colors, Missouri, Kansas. Let's go.
That's it. That's exactly right.
And have a package that, my daughter loves going to gymnastics meets. It's not even 2 hours long. In and out. A dual meet with Florida. They'll sell the Hearn. They'll put 12,000 people in the Hearn Center for a dual meet with Florida gymnastics.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. Kids, it holds their attention, and we're the perfect sport for modern day person, ADD sport, right? We've got 12 different things going on at one time. We package it in a way that people are in and out. We're not there for 12 hours, like getting cynical here on my soapbox.
Yeah. That's good.
I got some great, Mark changed careers to be around his boys a little bit more. So got out of coaching and working with Boost now, and worked out well, certainly with Connor, and see how fast he ran.
Yeah, but, yeah, exactly.
But so I went with our coaches out to the Azusa meet. That's the first time I've ever been there. And I was on the track at 7:30 in the morning and left at midnight.
Oh.
That's not, come on. What are we doing? What are we doing? And you sit here and just dissect the sport, but that is not what people are interested in.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. Well, I'm going to encourage you to continue. I'm going to say the fight. We need to have the voices on all sides, to be frank, but we've got to figure out how to make changes, positive changes to the sport. And so I just want to encourage you to keep having those discussions. Keep, sometimes it's easy to get, especially, now you got a good little while here to still coach. You're not retiring anytime soon here, Brett. But it's easy to start thinking like, well, I'm on the end of my career, blah, blah. The sport needs you. The profession needs you. So I just want to encourage that. We're over time. So last question, Brett, as you are looking forward, it's September when we're recording this. The 2025 season is right around the bend. You get to define what the future looks like here. What's got you excited about the future of Mizzou track and field?
Well, I get a great young staff. It's like looking back in time, they're killing it. They're doing awesome. We're excited about some of the changes we've had here, with the addition of our indoor bank track. So we're going to take advantage of that. And certainly the cross country thing, we're trying to get that off the ground. It was, we spent a lot of years working on that. That was an idea back in 2010. I took to the city of Columbia, and they said no, and then came back a few years later to tell us how to do it. And I said, well, you gotta excavate 2 loops and gotta be fully integrated. And they said, what else? I'm like, Burns, get in here. What else do we need? It took a lot of years, but then COVID hit, so we didn't have a proper christening. So we're really excited to be able to host, not just for the University of Missouri, but for the state of Missouri, the Midwest, the NCAA championships coming up in 2025. And hope, the task and everybody involved with it. Everything about what you do needs to be world-class. So if you're the custodian, be world-class.
Yeah.
And I just want this event for our state, but for the kids that are going to participate and the spectators, just to be above and beyond anything they've experienced before. So
where's SEC indoors this year?
Texas A&M.
Texting you guys. Oh, the new facility. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys ready? There's a whole different SEC.
Yeah, man. No, it's fun. Like, the thing with the SEC is like, yeah, it's hard, but if you're a competitor, man, like, I've been blessed in this sport. Let's face it. The amount of time I was able to travel with Christian and be at meets all over the world and pretty amazing, right? But the SEC championship, like that is just awesome. The number of schools, the colors, the pageantry, the investment, the quality. I mean, you're desensitized is like, oh, that's just a collegiate record.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a collegiate record. Like, come on, we expect that, so it's absolutely amazing and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And like, I just want people that want to be in that environment and just excited to be there. Cause man, it like 3 times a year, I just get really excited to go to something. It's the SEC championship. I get to do it 3 times a year. Other
That's
coaches
true.
only get to do it once,
That's right. I love it. Well, Brett, man, thank you. Thank you. You talk about blessing. I just so humble that you'd bless us with your time, man. It's great to learn that journey. It's great to see perspective of someone who has been at one institution and the growth, not only of the institution and the program, but of yourself and the staff and things like that. I think there's a lot going on at Mizzou. You talked about the indoor facility, the cross country facility, the staff, the people you're signing. I just saw that high jumper you guys signed. Holy cow. There's a lot of cool things going on at Missouri, and you're in my favorite conference. So of course I'm always gonna root for you. So Brett, thank you so much, man. The most important, most valuable thing you can ever give me, the most expensive thing you can ever give me is your time. And I know you're busy. And so I'm just so grateful that you'd spend some time with us and share your journey with our listeners, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here, guys. Again, I think this is 2 throws coaches in a row or 2 out of 3 weeks. I really do love our throws coaches, and this was such a great perspective to see the non-traditional route. So if you're a distance coach out there, who knows, maybe next year you're the next great throws coach, and I want to hear that journey. So join us next week. We'll do it all over again and have a lot of fun. See you guys.